Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in.
Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to welcome Jackie Rubio, whose path into Reiki, quantum healing, intuitive work, automatic writing, and energy practices was born from survival. Jackie has endured what most of us cannot begin to comprehend: the murder of her son, Devin, the devastating failure of the systems meant to protect her, and the heartbreaking loss of her grandson. As a recovering alcoholic and single mother, Jackie knows what it means to be broken open by life. But she also knows something deeper. Love doesn't vanish when life becomes unbearable. The bonds we share, whether with those still here or those who have crossed over, continue to reach for us, guide us, and refuse to let us go. What is truly extraordinary about Jackie is how she has chosen healing, growth, and helping others to navigate their own storms with the fierce compassion she learned to offer herself. Through her book, From Murder to Messages, Jackie has reached out to anyone who has ever felt shattered, betrayed, or alone, standing as proof that even when life tries to break you, you can rise again with laughter, with love, and with a connection to something larger than the hurt. Even in the darkest moments, there is a path back to the light. I'm looking forward to talking with Jackie, who's joining us from Oregon, to share her heartbreaking story about how her beloved Devin's life was taken by his ex-wife and the extraordinary spiritual path that followed. We'll explore how Reiki, quantum healing, intuitive abilities, automatic writing, and energy work became Jackie's lifeline through unimaginable loss. How Devin showed Jackie unmistakably that life continues beyond death. The powerful sign Jackie received from Devin during the week his murderer was set to stand trial, and more, for what is surely going to be a tender, uplifting reminder that while grief changes us forever, love never ends. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, Jackie. A warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Wow. Hi. Thank you so much. Wow. What an introduction. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm just so glad to be able to share the story of my son, to share Devin's life with you guys, and also the pathway to getting through some of the most unimaginable, hurt and pain that you can go through.
What you have been through and how you have gone through it and survived it is so remarkable. And I really want to share you with everyone because people get so caught up in their dramas and what is going on, and look at what you dealt with. And instead of sinking and staying stuck, you started reaching out and learning things to help yourself, which is just amazing. And then you had other issues too that you dealt with. So I want to share you with everyone. You're very inspiring, girl. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So to begin, how about you share with us the kind of kid and the kind of man Devin was, including the heartwarming story of his first job and how loved he was by everyone who knew him.
I love this. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. So Devin was 6'4". He
Wow.
was incredibly handsome, but he was a very shy. He is I would say based on like socially anxiety for sure. So he wasn't a real, outgoing kid, but everybody just loved him. And he was so helpful. He was actually really devoted to church, and he always wanted to be with the pastor and the pastor's wife and the youth pastor and the youth pastor's wife. And unfortunately, we just weren't that kind of family. I was an excessive drinker throughout a lot of Devin's lifetime. And I had 4 children altogether, and it was loud, it was chaotic. I didn't have a lot of, I would say, parental skills. So Devin was constantly looking for that stability outside of our home. And he just was delightful. I always would get complimented on how polite he was. So you can imagine, 6'4" and being presence wise intimidating, but just having this mouth that only spoke, yes, ma'am, thank you, sir. He just was so polite. And I still hear to this day sometimes, somebody, wow, that Devin, since he was just a young boy, was always so polite. So it was his demeanor. And, he was very, very devoted to church. He followed all the rules, I would say, of church. And
Which denomination were you a part of?
the kids grew up. I was in the Church of Christ for a while, but then we went to it's a Calvary Chapel church, where they were allowed to have like music and worship music. And I feel like we all fit in quite a bit better there. And so Devin was in youth group there. That's actually in middle school where he met his wife at, was in the youth group. And he just was not a drinker. He was a complete opposite of me. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke pot. He just literally wanted to pay his taxes, have a 401k, get married, have a child, from a very early age. This is just who my son was. Yeah, I tell a story. My niece and him, they were probably 3 and 4. And she had the baby in the stroller, and they would walk around, and he'd have his arm around her. And, people in the neighbors would ask what they're doing. And he would say, oh, this is my wife, and we're taking my daughter for a walk. I just got off of work. It's just who he was. He just wanted to be a husband and a father his whole life.
Man,
Yeah. So
that's
I hope.
amazing. Yeah, how about the story about his first job?
So Devin, this is interesting. So he did struggle in school a little bit towards, especially in high school. He had a real issue with mathematics. It was really tough on him. So he wasn't getting the credits he needed, and he went into a youth corp environment where he was getting special training, getting his GED, getting like forklift certificates and stuff. And he was 18 years old. He got hired straight out of that program to be the janitor at the school district of the little town that we lived in. And it was so interesting. All the little kids loved him so much. And he would actually, on his break at school, he would go into their classrooms and do the reading for them and stuff. But when the first day of his job, we lived about 5 miles from the school. And the first day of his job, he was going to ride his bike, and he got less than like a mile down the road, and his bike had a flat tire, and he walked the rest of the way to work.
Wow.
And the principal got there, and he was sitting on the steps. He was still the first person there to go in for his job. And he was really well loved. There's an article written about him. They had a special graduation ceremony for him. And all the children that were at the school attended in the auditorium, and they gave him a cap and a gown. And the reason why he had to ride his bike was because he had actually had an accident in the little pickup he drove, and the doors were ripped off. So he had not, trying to save money to put new doors on his pickup. And the principal and the superintendent of the school bought him new doors for his pickup.
Oh my gosh.
It's incredible. Like, and there was a big article, in the town that
Wow.
we lived in, written about him. So I just hope that just kind of shows a light
Yeah, how
of who
wonderful
he
he
was.
was. My God. So our listeners who do not know yet your story because they haven't gotten your book yet, how would you describe his ex-wife? And can you explain? I know you met her in school. Can you explain the circumstances that led to his life being taken?
Yeah, so he did meet his ex-wife in middle school, in youth group. I believe she was 2 years younger than him. So when he was, I think, 18, 19, 20, and then she was, 17, 18, 19, they entered into more of a romantic relationship. And he was very devoted to church. So he had saved himself for marriage, and they had a marriage. They had a wedding at my house, actually. And then very shortly after she became pregnant with my grandson. And it was an immediate change in behavior. She no longer would allow my son to sleep in the room with her. And when the baby was born, she wouldn't let him around the baby very much. Especially, she said, "Well, you have nightmares, you're going to hurt the baby."
Oh my
So
God.
he slept downstairs on the couch. We were not allowed to spend any time with the baby. And she called the shots, which is interesting because she was literally, I don't even think she was 5 feet tall, and she called the shots. She
Very
was
controlling,
very controlling.
very narrow-minded, controlling person.
Yes,
Wow.
extremely. And it reached the point of being it was obviously unhealthy. There was so much childhood trauma and stuff that was just bleeding into her as a parent. And so the marriage didn't last very long, unfortunately. And that was devastating to Devin because, he had morals. And shortly after she literally threw him out. And he didn't want the divorce. He didn't want the separation. He didn't know what to do. She actually entered into a same-sex relationship, which really confused Devin because, I mean, they had gone to church together. He thought they had the same values. And she breastfed my grandson till he was 3.5. And so in the state of Oregon, my son wasn't allowed overnight visits.
Oh
So
my
she
goodness.
still had so much control over the time he spent with my grandson and how he could be a father and a parent. So, he had to fight for basic rights to my grandson from the very beginning. And he did. And I'm really proud of him for that because our court systems and sometimes mothers can make it very difficult for fathers to have just the basic rights to their children. And it takes a lot to stand up to that. And unfortunately, to be honest with you, that's what ended his life, was his desire to continue to fight for my grandson and to go against, her controlling behavior as far as how much time he could spend with my grandson. So, and he had to deal with having my grandson had two moms. So he had two women who were very much in control of how he was raised, where he went.
You're saying two moms, the mother and her mother, or?
No, the mother and her relationship. The
Oh,
mother.
right.
and
Oh,
her
right.
at that-
Oh, yes. Oh, wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
at that point, it was her fiance. So he had to deal with two moms who were very controlling over how this boy, his son, was raised, where he could go, like when Devin could have him. And he had the minimum amount of visitations, that you could get. He just couldn't afford an attorney. He couldn't, afford it through the divorce and things like that. So it was heartbreaking. It was very unfair. And Devin did his very best. He was actually a really good dad. Of course he was. I mean, it's all he wanted his entire life,
Right. Right.
But he
So
was.
did he come to her door one day? What happened exactly?
Well, what happened was she started taking Devin's visits away. He would go to pick up my grandson, and she just wouldn't be there. And he decided to get the police involved and initiate, the paperwork that he did have, his rights. And then that turned into really terrible allegations. She just said the worst things about him. And by this point in time, Devin had met another woman. He had a fiance that he lived with, that he was, engaged to. And, she said there were things that were said that he threw him down 5 flights of stairs or put a gun to his head. I mean, these were things that were easily to prove that they weren't happening, because you just can't throw a kid down 5 flights of stairs without some kind of physical,
Wow.
bruising on the child's body. And she also had this poor child at the doctor's every single day. She had him diagnosed with some really odd, terrible disease that meant that he couldn't run, play, have recess.
It sounds like she's a very mentally ill person.
I feel like that's exactly what it was. So Devin, he had to go through all these horrible investigations, and he did. I mean, I just wish people could understand how upright this child is. And he was so calm and methodical and just did everything that was asked of him and then some. I know that they had to spend their wedding savings to hire a custody attorney, and he just kept fighting her, not in a nasty way either. Just as calm. He took a second job. He paid for an attorney. He went to every court date.
My goodness.
And, what happened was they overturned all of what she said. And they said, there's just no proof of this. And so at that point, it sort of alerted, like we're saying, it just sort of alerted law enforcement and the DHS, something is not right with this woman, and there's some coaching involved. The child's saying things that obviously aren't true. So they kind of scrutinized her, and then Devin filed for full custody.
That was what did it. Whoa.
Yeah, he filed for full custody, and financially, I think she was struggling to keep an attorney because every time we'd go to court, it had to get postponed because she didn't have an attorney anymore. She had to get a new attorney. And we reached the point now where, she continued some allegations. So he would ask her to please meet him at the police station because he was, he wanted to protect himself, and she would never do it. So he put a dash cam on his car. That way he could go safely pick up my grandson, and she couldn't say he, did anything and he was always so careful. He would always bring somebody else because he told me, he said, "Mom, Paige bought a gun, and I'm honestly afraid she's crazy enough to shoot me." And so he was bringing people, that his fiance or his fiance's sister would come with him mostly, or her mother, to pick up Grayson. And he would park in a manner where the camera would roll. So everything got picked up right at the front door. So nothing could get blown out of proportion or said. You have to understand, this child he didn't have a speeding ticket. He absolutely never, not 1 ounce of, domestic violence or raising his voice to any of them.
Wow.
Yeah, he just wasn't that kind of a boy, And so he was protecting himself. And then we come to December 16th of 2022. And all of the court stuff had been overturned. He had his visits back with my grandson. I was making plans to come be with them. His fiance and I are on the phone together. It's just joyful.
And he had full custody?
No, we were in court at that point. We're still in court, still, trying to receive full custody, still trying to, go to court over it. And everything was just really joyful at this point. It was it had been almost a full year of this. So it's like the clouds parted, the sun was out, it's Christmas. It's just a beautiful time of year. And his fiance and we're on the phone, we're making all these plans. And then about 10 minutes later, she calls me back and she said, "Have you heard from your son today?" And I said, I assumed he was with you. She said, "No, it's his weekend to pick up Grayson, and he went to go pick him up." And I said, "By himself?" And she said, "Yeah, he didn't want Mom and I's, our Christmas shopping trip to get, postponed." And I was like, "No," I said, "He called earlier, but I was outside feeding the animals, so I didn't get it." And she said, "Okay." And then, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes later, she called. She was screaming bloody murder. And she was crying and she was in hysterics. And she said that someone called her and said that Paige shot Devin and that he's dead.
Oh
and
God.
I live 3.5 hours away from where he was picking up my grandson. And I feel so terrible because I told her to shut up. I said, that Devin is the least amount of drama of a child you have ever encountered. And I said, well, someone is just starting drama right now. And 9 days before Christmas. And she said, no, somebody said that Paige is incarcerated, that there was a conflict. And so I kept calling the police and I kept calling the hospitals, and I just couldn't get any kind of concrete answer. Nobody would talk to me. Nobody would answer me. So I started driving. And I was maybe 40 minutes into the drive. And I mean, there's ice it's nighttime, but it's ice on the road. It's dark. And I did receive a phone call from my nephew confirming that she had shot and killed him. It was,
Oh my God, how devastating.
it was just absolutely devastating. So he had pulled up the way that he always did with the camera rolling and knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and there were no words. There was no tussle, nothing. And she shot him. She shot him right in the heart. And the district attorney said that it would be a kill shot, but he continued to fight. He could, not her, but try to protect himself. He had shots in his hands. He just had ended up receiving 9 shots.
Oh
And
my God.
even later on a 911 call, they could still continue to pick up the shots being fired. So my grandson was in the home, and he was 7 years old at the time. And that's it. That's the last time I saw my son.
Oh my
That's the last
God. And
time.
then the court system supported her mother raising your grandson, and you don't have any contact with him. How sad.
I have no contact with my grandson now. So the story was for a while that Devin, I guess that he was being violent, tried to kick in the door, that she was protecting herself. And then that my grandson, 7 years old, he's gifted. I mean, he's in a gifted class, that he's in the bathtub and didn't know that his father was shot and killed. That's none of that was true, but she had full custody, and she's innocent until proven guilty. So DHS wouldn't step in.
And we can leave it there, but that's very sad and surprises me about the state of Oregon, because you would think they'd be a little more enlightened and progressive about people with mental problems and all that jazz. But I digress. Let's go to your book that talks about From Murder to Messages. My goodness. A book born from pain and purpose. So it offers a hand to anyone who, like you, felt shattered, betrayed, or alone. And you remind readers that no matter how far they fall, love will find them. That even in the darkest moments, there's always a path back to the light. What would you like to tell everyone about your book?
Well, I just want to say that the title of the book is exactly what it is. It's From Murder to Messages. And that there's a lot of key aspects about me and my personal life, my childhood, how I continued to carry those patterns over, my alcoholism, addictions, how I raised my children. And so the book has a lot of it's like how I made it. And
I love how honest and authentic you are. It's really admirable.
Yes, thank you.
What happened? This is who I was. This is what was going on.
Yeah, and I wanted to make people understand, the relationships issue I had with my son. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say oh, we have the greatest relationship in the entire world. No, I was an alcoholic. He wanted away from me. He didn't want to live in our home. It was, tumultuous for him. And so when he died, I mean, I had been sober about 2.5 years, and I was working very hard to rebuild my relationship with him, because Devin he had his boundaries, and he loved me. I know he loved me, but if I was drinking or my life was in chaos, I couldn't come around. He wouldn't even take phone calls or any of that. So I was working very hard, to have that relationship with him. And, we were really getting there. We were really rebuilding. I actually moved from Texas back to Oregon and, was able to provide some financial assistance for an attorney and live about 2.5, 3 hours away from him so that I could go into that courtroom with him so he could have support. And we were getting there. It was really beautiful. We were really getting there. And he was willing to do the work too, in order to have that relationship with his mom. And it meant so much to me.
Oh my God. But that's another thing in a way, because you did that, and he's on the other side now. You didn't have, you had some closure because your relationship was solid. It wasn't like you weren't talking to him and all this happened.
Yeah, we were really, really working hard on it. So I wrote the book. Devin showed me the book in my mind's eye. Probably started about a year after he passed. I was seeing the cover of the book, and he was so sweet. He even put New York Times bestseller sticker on it. I didn't get that yet, but I did get Amazon bestseller.
Good for you. Good for you. Good for you.
He showed me the cover of the book. He showed me some paragraphs, that I knew that were going to, need to be put in the book. But it's hard to write your experience, and to get into the weeds of, my relationship with him and who I was as a mother. The first part was really, really hard, but then I got to share. I got to share all these beautiful people and all these beautiful things that happened on my path that helped me get through it. I got to share this awakening, this knowledge that Devin has brought to me, that there's life after death, that, the things I thought about death, or the things I thought about religion or hell or any of that, he was able to show me, like,
So
how,
you
how,
literally channel him now. He really just comes right into you.
yeah. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
fantastic.
it mostly with automatic writing, but then I think you have a question coming up that I would love to be able to
Yeah, I would like you to
expand
tell
more.
everybody. Yeah. So what brought you to Reiki, quantum healing, intuitive abilities, automatic writing, and energy work during this deepest grief? How did these practices help you? And how did you stay sober through all this with what was going on with you? I mean, my goodness. Is that
So
how part of the way you coped with it, by getting into this so that you didn't fall back on your old support?
well, I think that, when Devin died, one of the first phone calls I made was to my alcoholic sponsor, and she was also a therapist. So, I was so scared that I was going to relapse. I was so scared that I was going to drink. And I have 3 surviving children, and this was hard on them. Horrible. The most horrible circumstances ever. And I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to, then be a burden on them, go back into the alcohol. So I instantly, like, I went to some meetings, and even though my son had just been shot and killed, I was sitting in an AA meeting because I was so afraid of relapsing. So that was a huge, huge, thing in my mind, was like, I cannot drink. If I drink, I'll die. If I'll drink, I'll put my kids through worse than they're already going through right now. But I also think that there was this strange finality to the guilt that I had, the way that I'd raised him, the mistakes that I'd made. And I just wanted to somehow show him, wherever he's at, like, I'm going to stay strong for you. I'm not going to be that mother ever again. And it really drove me, to be honest with
Well, in
you.
a way, it was a way to honor him, because that part of you really bothered him, and now you were healing it. And what a way to honor him. So what brought you to all these healing modalities? What began to happen for you with that?
Well, about 8 months after he passed, I don't know how I found a medium named Suzanne Giesman. And I didn't even believe in mediumship, and I didn't even believe in, a lot of the spirituality pieces. I wasn't exactly spiritual, when he passed. And I found that she was going to do a cruise. And I don't know, but I just was really compelled to sign up for this cruise. And in the process of that, I got a roommate, somebody I didn't know, to share expenses with. And it was the first time I'd met the people from Helping Parents Heal. It was a grief cruise. There was 550 people on the cruise for her Awaken Away cruise. And the roommate that I had was a facilitator for Helping Parents Heal, and she was a Reiki person. And so in the process of, of sharing a cabin space with her, she gave me Reiki. And I have to tell you that it was in 8 months of just pure hell that I'd been in. It was the first time I'd felt any peace, or just some, respite from all of that, And it was about maybe 20, 30 minutes. And I just I said to myself, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to learn this. And I want to do this for other parents, other moms, because I just know how horrible, miserable I was, and how this literally just gave me the first piece. It's like I took a breath for the first time in 8 months. and breathed out, and my my shoulders relaxed. And I mean, not that it just stopped my grief or immediately or anything like that, but there was certainly something in that. And I felt really connected to my son during that session and on the cruise. So that's like a really big
Well,
part
he
of
was with
my
you.
story.
Absolutely. He was with you. And how wonderful. You must have gotten a great reading. He must have come through, Suzanne, like gangbusters.
Well, so this is even better is that, Suzanne, she's got such an incredible left brain story, and I trusted her as, her background. And, she was a Navy officer, and, I was just, and married to a captain of the Navy, and just all these, things that made me feel more trusting. But, she's got a 5-year waiting list. So, but we were on the cruise, and everybody gets to stand in line, and, she likes to shake everyone's hand and meet them. And I was standing, and I met her and shook her hand, and she said, "I'm supposed to give you a reading." And she says, "Don't tell anybody," which I wrote in my book. So everybody knows Suzanne Giesma gave me a special reading. But, and she said, so she gave me, told me to go to her assistant, and her assistant said, "Okay, but it's going to be quite a while." And 2 weeks later, she called me to set up the reading. So
He was talking to her. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't even just that I had a reading. It was the fact that of what happened in, the circumstances, and,
No,
for her to give me the reading.
no coincidences. I mean, it was all meant to be. You were supposed to do that,
Yeah. And I
including the
don't think,
roommate you got.
yes. And I don't think I could have gotten a reading from any other medium that would have meant as much as it did from her, due to her background, due to how
Because you could well, it's like I do the big introduction because I want people to respect who you are and your background. And that made you respect for you, for what you needed. That made you respect and was
trust.
going to kind of trust her. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what was it? What did it feel like to receive that reading? I mean, like, she must have come through with amazing validation.
She came through with a lot of amazing validation. I have to admit, though, I was in quite a bit of grief. So, we're having the reading, and she's, saying things that I'm not sure at that point. Later I was like, "Oh, you're right. Here, I'll email you back and say, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that." But the best thing I think that I got was I had 3 questions that were in my mind, and she answered all 3 of them without me asking. He knew
Of course he
that
did.
my son knew what his mom needed to be okay after that reading. And I was really nervous about the reading. You have to understand, I come, from a bit of a religious background, and that's like devil worship and things at some point, so I was really nervous and really torn about, having the reading. And I had, spilled almost an entire pot of coffee that morning. I was pouring myself a cup of coffee, and I was so nervous and distraught that I spilled the cup. I dropped the pot down, and she asked Devin to give her some current events, and he said, "I see my mom wiping coffee up off a counter." Yeah, and then also, she gave me some incredible, things that were undeniable. But one of the also, he showed her, I had his car, and he showed me driving his car, and that he was with me while I was driving the car, and I had some incredible communication with him that I didn't know was communication. I just thought I was grieving and making things up in the car. And he showed her that I was eating pizza the night before. I mean, just
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of piece of wisdom that he gave you, or, or a sign or support that helped you with this as you were beginning to move from all this grief and hurt to some rebirth and hope? Is there something some wisdom he transmitted to you?
I mean, I think the biggest wisdom that I got was that he's not gone. He's not gone. He continued to reiterate that in every chance he could, every sign that he could, that he's still right with me, and that he loves me. All that guilt and all that shame and all that I'd gone through trying to be that boy's mother, he can come back and he can tell me that. Like, he knows everything I've ever done now, and he forgives me, and he loves me, and
At the whole life review.
he wants to still be with me. I mean, that I can't tell you. And I mean, people ask me how I stayed sober. Well, that was a lot of how I stayed sober, because that's the best way to get out of guilt and get out of shame is, having someone, that first Devin was pretty rough. He was pretty judgmental, and he had his boundaries. So for him to come back and say, Ma, I see it all. I see what you
Now
went
he
through.
understood it. Now he started to understand it.
Yes.
How has how did this help you to become a better parent for your other surviving children, knowing that what Devin gave you and the proof of survival and all, and you were working your way through alcoholism, you're working your way through grief, and you're healing through these modalities you found and all. How did this transform your family to what have you got today from all of this?
Well, one of the most amazing gifts that Devin gave me is my daughter and I were estranged. She was estranged from our whole family. And after Devin died, she came back, and we've been able to work through it. We're so close now. I mean, there's a lot of healing that's taken place, and I'm extremely close to all my children. Actually, I live on 20 acres in Oregon, in Eastern Oregon, and all the kids live here. All my adult children live here. So, I mean, we have different, houses, but I mean, they all live here. So I can't imagine that. I didn't imagine that I would ever be able to mend my relationship with them. And I know that they support me. They see how supportive I am of others, how helpful I am, like how my, energy work and how my abilities sort of have developed. And, they might not always understand, things, but they're very open to it, and they're very loving and supportive to me. So it's made a huge difference in my relationship with my surviving kids.
I think that's great, and you are actually giving them tools for their own lives with your knowledge about spirituality. So now I want to know, someone comes to you and they need some healing. They're going through tremendous grief, and you've got the use of Reiki, intuitive channeling, and the lessons you've learned from rising through grief to help people move through trauma and spiritual awakening, which is amazing. How do you use this stuff to help people? What is it like when someone comes to you and they're devastated like you were?
I think that the intuitive abilities, I think I've always had them. And, I came from a really traumatic childhood, a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and I was really hyper vigilant, how to survive, how to stay safe. And then I was a teen mom. I was, addicted to meth for a while. I was a drinker, and so I covered it. And so what I noticed is now, like, I was such an empath, and I had no idea. Like, I felt what everybody else feels. And I didn't know how to protect myself. I didn't know how to, keep my energy clear of other people. So now that I've been able to learn that and do that, I can just hear. And Devin, he cracks me up. I mean, Devin was never very into drama, but he loved our small town and our small town drama. I mean, and he would call me, Ma, you're not going to believe this, and he would tell me stuff. So now when I have people, that come, they want, I found that people who would like a Reiki session or a healing session of some kind, oftentimes it's best to start with some psychic work, because we've got to untangle.
I agree.
Like, we've got to untangle, like, if they're at a crossroads and they're just so mixed up and they've got these things coming in, if you could help somebody see their paths a little more clearly, then that will relax them enough to actually be able to lay
Right.
still and get an energy healing session. So, and if they come to me and they have, we'll say, romantic issues or something, and they don't know what to do, Devin is right here. He's the one that will tell me oftentimes, like, he'll show me if this is a good partnership or, something like that. And I had a girlfriend ask me about a man that she was dating, and I heard my son as loud and clear as you can say, "Tell her to check his credit, Ma." Oh,
Wow.
yeah, tell her to check his credit, Ma.
Wow. Wow.
So that's part of, like, and then I think just because I've suffered this deep loss and because I've lived this path and I literally have no judgment. I have no judgment, I guess, anybody and their life circumstance, what they're going through. And I have a lot of empathy and, and I don't want to tell anybody what to do in a psychic session. All I really want to do is show them that they're so powerful, that they're a soul. They're not,
So you
they're
give
a
them
soul.
the psychic message. You
Yes.
do that for them. And then you also use Reiki, which is a form of
Yes.
energy healing work that goes into the cells. How does Reiki work exactly to do that? And you teach them automatic writing probably.
So Reiki, for me, I feel like Reiki is a vibrational healing. And so, you can be hands on, hands off, and you use, vibration. It is really good for the physical body. It's really good for the layers, the aura layers. And it's a frequency. But I also have learned how to do quantum healings, and quantum healings is more of a light healing. And so it heals faster, it heals at the speed of light. So, these are just some really powerful things that you can use to help somebody all the way around. You can help them with their life questions, with what's right in front of them. You can help heal their physical body. You can help heal the layers of their body. And then you can take them to the quantum field where you will find the root of the problem and heal it like at the speed of light. So
it's terrific.
yeah, those are the three. I mean, not that there aren't others. And Devin always comes into my healing sessions, my Reiki sessions. He cracks me up. I didn't know what was happening at first. I have to tell you, I just thought I was losing my mind. But he shows up, he shows me he's in a work vest and a hard hat, and he's got his work boots on. And oftentimes, because I do give a lot of other mom sessions, it's just where my heart is, why I got started doing it.
You're paying it forward. You're paying it forward.
Yeah. And oftentimes, he will bring their child in. So I will also see their child in the healing, and they're able to connect to their child during, their healings as well. So, and then sometimes I notice in a Reiki session, he'll show me, he's just kind of leaning on the shovel. He's like, you got it, mom.
I'm very curious. What was the message he gave you during the time the trial was scheduled for the interview? Wasn't there a really significant message he passed to you at that point?
Yeah. So, I mean, this was, I'd had a mediumship reading and I'd had some experiences with him, but I still just wasn't 100% on board and understanding, what a sign is and what it means. And I mean, this was a really hard time for me. We're getting ready to start the trial. We're in court. I have to look at the woman. I've been in court for my grandson. I've lost. I had to, look at the woman who murdered my son, say bad things about me as a mother while I'm just trying to see my grandson. So it was really a really tough time. I'm not really sure how I survived it all, to be honest with you, but I was with a couple of my friends and we were going on a walk to a really beautiful scene in Central Oregon. And I was walking on the pavement and they were quite a bit in front of me. And I just was just beat up, and I was just sad and my heart just hurt. And I just I said out loud for some reason, I was like, I love you, Devin. And then it was so odd. I saw this little stick on the cement and I stopped and I looked at the stick and it just made me think of Devin, which is very odd. Why does the stick make you think of of somebody? And I literally took one step and my eyes were still on the ground. And in the cement, somebody had wrote in the cement when it was wet, a heart with an arrow through it, and the word Ma, M-A.
Oh my.
Devin calls me Ma. He like, I'm not mom, I'm not mommy, Ma, Ma, Ma. And he even came through Suzanne Giesemann and was like, Ma, my Ma. And with this enunciation that only he had, and there it was just written right there, carved it. I mean, why would a log make me say I love you to Devin?
That's so not an accident. And there you were during that time. He was letting you know he was with you and
Yeah.
it was going to be okay. That's fantastic. And I want to talk to you about healing. What is your message about the importance of healing and choosing light over hatred? Because you could have really drowned in hatred over this.
I could have. I could have. And, I have to say, I feel like the fact that I'm an alcoholic has a lot to do with why I had to move past the hatred and why I have to move past the bitterness. Because as an alcoholic, your number one threat to drink again or have a relapse is anger, is bitterness. We work those steps and we do that program in order to get rid of those things so that we don't have that, because that is what the number one offense is for you to re-drink. And so I had to take those same concepts, and I wanted to stay sober so badly, to the point where I was willing to use those on the hatred and the bitterness of a woman who murdered my son and her mother who took my
Amazing.
grandson.
That's amazing. It is
I mean, I'm
absolutely
not perfect at it. I don't want, anyone to
no,
think
but
that
like for people to hear this and they have problems that are absolutely valid and things they're going through, but sometimes apples to oranges. I mean, like if Jackie can get through this, you can get through what's going on with you, to keep the
I
faith.
do. I do. And I say, it kind of loudly, and I say it kind of boldly. If I can stay sober through all of this, then anybody who's trying to get off of drugs or alcohol can stay sober.
Can do it. Yeah, and you can help, and you help them with the modalities that you know. Do you have a program offering or something you'd like to share with our audience today?
Absolutely. So I have a Facebook group I love. It's Light After Darkness, and once a month I get on the group and we do free healings, free Reiki, free quantum healings, sometimes some free psychic questions, Q&A. We go over questions people have from reading the book. And that is completely free. And I have to say, I really enjoy doing it. It's one of my favorite things. Like, I don't even get done doing one before I'm already like starting to think about like what
But
would
you're
be.
helping people. It feels wonderful.
Yeah, and so that is something I really enjoy doing. That's completely free. Your audience can definitely have, a 10% off of any of my offerings. I do psychic quantum Reiki. I do also teach people automatic writing, provide the space for them to hear from their own guides, because that's important to me.
That's so great.
I don't think that anyone needs to depend on me or anyone else to tell them, what their loved ones or their guides think. I feel like they just might need some help opening up to that. So that's an offering. And then I have a sliding fee scale, and will always offer a healing to any parents who've lost a child.
Wow. Well, we're going to leave information about this in the show notes, everyone. So, just check it out. There'll be links to all of this so that you can connect with Jackie easily. And what is Jackie's tip for finding joy in life again, even after such profound loss? If you could find joy again, anybody can. Wow.
Yeah, I think that at the beginning, after my son was murdered and my grandson was being taken from me, and every skeleton in my closet was brought out, for anybody and everybody to know about, there was just nothing good. And I had to be willing to really take the small things and live, moment to moment. And I was in such a darkness and such a dark place that, a flower growing through a crack in the cement really meant something to me. It really brought a little light and a little piece of
Right.
beauty to me. And so I feel like I find joy because I allow myself to see it in the smallest things, and it's been over 3 years, and I have joy in my life. I was sitting on the back porch, I think it was yesterday. I have a little miniature pig, and I love that miniature pig, and she brings me joy. And then I have a big pig, and we have some chickens, and I was sitting on the porch, and I see my pig and my other grandson out there, and I was like, this is it. This is joy.
This is joy. That's absolutely true. Jackie, in closing, I want to share this very wise and wonderful quote from your book, From Murder to Messages, with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience. And it starts, quote, "What I want most is for you to know this: your loved ones are not gone. Your spirit team has never left you, even if you were never aware that they existed. Even when you're screaming, even when you're spiraling, even when you feel like you can no longer go on, they are still with you. They are still loving you. They are still guiding you. They will use anything, your belief system, your doubt, your heartbreak, your weirdest dreams, to show you that love continues on." Jackie, You're a living proof that even when life tries to break you, you can rise again with laughter, with love, and with a connection to something larger than the hurt. Your message is simple and powerful. No matter how far you've fallen, love will find you. And even in life's darkest moments, there's always a path back to the light. Thank you from my heart for sharing your extraordinary story and wisdom with us today. And I wish you truly abundant blessings always.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you. I always like to say to be continued. Bye for
Yes.
now.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon. Until next time, many blessings.